So what is living in you? There was a young man who heard that there was a wise, old, holy man living on the mountain. So he decided that he would climb the mountain and go seeking this wise, old, holy man to gain some of that wisdom. And while wandering through the woods, when he got higher up on the mountain, he saw a cabin, and he went and he knocked on the door. And a servant answered the door and said, "Can I help you?" And he said, "I heard that there was a wise, old, holy man living up in these mountains." And he said, "You're correct. Come on in." He said, "Well, where is he? Let me show you around." And he took him from room to room to room, and there was no one there. So when they got back to the living room, he said, "Hey, I came all the way up the mountain to find this wise old holy man. Where the hell is he? Can you go get him for me?" And the servant said to him, "When you can treat every being that you meet as if they are that wise old holy man that you seek, whether you think of them as a servant or not, then you'll actually have found what you're seeking." Think of it, what does it matter what we find in another if we can't find it in ourselves? So this is part of the story called Be True to Yourself. Now, I want to take you on this little journey that's part of the message, and then after that, we're going to do a meditation. But the message is based on what are we as human beings seeking, and where are we seeking it? Now, I have a statement called the Universal Great One. And when I say the Universal Great One, it's that oneness that permeates the universe, but is also living in you and living in every other being, every other human being, but every other living being, and within creation itself. I often like to say it's a name for that greater mystery in which we all live and move and have our being. Controversy comes when we try to divide it. Can you imagine the foolishness of trying to divide the undividable? But the other reason I call it the great mystery is because it's then hard to argue with me that there's such a thing. Because you would be put in the position of having to say, there is none. And you go, "Oh, okay, then you know everything. Checkmate." There is most certainly a greater mystery in which we all live and move and have our being. Now, I'm fluid in my language, so I'll use different names to refer to this divine principle. Bear with me. If I say the word God, I'm not saying all the reasons that you object to God. I'm actually saying that ultimate truth or mystery. So let your mind stretch a little bit, just to get the metaphor of the talk, if you would. So there's a scripture that says, "And they made man in their image, male and female, they created them." Now, since we say they made man, and you go, wait a minute, it's a man and woman. No, wait. They said man and woman. What's interesting, though, is who are they? But the point that I'm saying that I would have you look at is mostly we human beings have made God, but also whatever it is we hold the highest and most sacred, what we call divine, in our own image. And throughout the earth, we have religions. And religions were brought to us by spiritual messengers who were living something and then shared what they were living through what we might call a teaching. The best teachings, of course, come from the people who are living the truth that they're espousing. Would you agree? Because if you're just espousing a truth and not living it, then I think we call that a hypocrite. The person who's living it might look to the people who are not living it and go, you hypocrites, you're not even living this. So we have these religions that portend to say, come to us and we'll make you a better person. Usually that has to do like, what would be a better person? Well, more loving, more peaceful, more joyful. If you think you're doing great because you have a lot of activities in your life and you're super happy with the excitement level of your life and you think you're running it just fine, you'll be like, screw you guys. But when you start messing up and you aren't able to cultivate that joy on your own, or the world's not providing it for you, often you'll go seeking it. But have you ever noticed that under the roof of these religions, roof being a metaphor, that the people are not necessarily exceedingly peaceful, loving, and joyful? Wouldn't that be the best advertisement? If they didn't have to tell you all their message and you just went there like, dang, when I went in that place, everybody was peaceful, loving, and joyful. Like, yeah, that's what I want. No, but they tell you the theory of how to be loving, peaceful, and joyful. And they tell you the teachings of the one who was and what they said you need to do to be it. And then you join in pursuit of this something. And as you're in that group, usually happens, you find out that every person in that group is not living up to the standards of that particular philosophy or belief system. And shockingly, even the leaders may be found wanting. And then you're so disappointed and hurt. It's like when you join that company and they say, when we hire people here, you're part of the family. And then later you get laid off because of downsizing and you're like, really, do we lay off our family? By the way, that was just a bullshit line to get you to give yourself over to the company. Because in the end, they'll go, what were you thinking, kid? It's business. So, what about the watch you promised me? Well, we're downsizing now and we don't have a watch division anymore. Anyways, you get my point. People go with the promise of something and they're there in the midst of it and actually not receiving it. Everything I'm saying is just stuff to think about, to reflect on, things that I reflect on. I think honestly, subconsciously, people don't really want that freedom that place is saying. Sure, they'd like to be more peaceful, loving, and joyful. But for example, if you were to join the church and then you looked at the life of Jesus, the Christian church, then you might say, but actually, I don't want to just walk around and heal people and bless them for their sins and forgive them and all that stuff. Like, I want to have a family, you know, there's other pursuits. I want to go snowboarding. I don't necessarily want to be that person. Or for example, if you were drawn to Buddhism, you'd be like, it's really cool that Buddha sat under this tree and noticed that all phenomena was passing and became enlightened. But I don't know if I want to spend the rest of my life walking around and in these robes and with a bald head and begging for alms and telling people and meditating and just pointing people back to this inner self. Like, you like the fact that he did it and you want a little bit of that in your life, but you don't necessarily want to live that whole life. I mean, think of it. Lao Tzu was like wandering, at the end of his life, he was wandering out in the woods by a river, and he met a boatman and he said, "Can you take me across the river?" And he's like, "Where are you going?" He's like, I'm just out of here. I'm just gonna go with nature and observe the Tao." And he's like, "Dude, could you write some of that stuff down before you go?" And so he wrote the Tao Te Ching, and then he disappeared in the woods. Like, maybe you want to live in a city. You don't necessarily want to be Lao Tzu, or let it go, something like the lawgiver, like Moses, you know, carrying a stick and making, you know, the sea open and, you know, trying to lead people to a place by which they'll be free and eating locusts in the wilderness. Or Muhammad and going on holy wars and trying to institute a type of government. You don't really necessarily want to take on the image of the leader. You just want some of the sweetness of a greater peace, a greater love, and a greater joy that the path promises that if you believe in these things, you will get this. And when I've gone to these places, and when I felt those things already living inside of me, and then I kind of looked at the other person's like, "Do you have that too?" Often they're like, "No, I'm miserable." I'm coming back time after time to get this thing that's promised, but I never get it. And can we say that some do seem to find it within the pathway? Some people under that umbrella, maybe it was Bodhidharma for Zen, you know, maybe it was St. Francis of Assisi for Christianity. They found the thing and they were living it. What if it was never in the religion? What if it may or may not have been in the person who started the religion, but what does it matter to you until you can receive it? What if the whole journey was only to find and awaken what was in you? That you went on the path just to acknowledge that there's a greater love, a greater peace, a greater joy already in your inner being. And that you don't have to shape it a certain way for it to exist. In other words, what if your resistance to having to become something to get the gift was a realization is, actually, I already have this freedom and I can be who I want to be. And I can live a life creatively that I want to live. What if you can have the freedom and all the rewards, but you don't have to become something to have it? And what if the different ways of approaching were open and available to you? In other words, you're in the realm of formlessness. And then knowing who this is who you are, you can come back and play creatively with different roles in life. This to me is the great joy, is finding that type of freedom and connection within myself, but then not having to be anything to hold on to it. Because it's in who I am. Remember the story of the person who went seeking for the wise old holy man, and let's make it could have been a wise old holy woman. And the servant told them, treat everyone this way, as if it was in them. But wouldn't the great discovery be that it was in you all along?